Today is Tuesday, April 21st, 11:30 a.m. Miami time, and I am speaking with President Julio Frenk. President Frenk, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your busy day to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
So I know, like everyone else, you are at home, but I was wondering if you could describe where you are currently located and how the recent pandemic has influenced or changed the structure of your life and work.
I am at home as president of the university. I am actually required contractually to live in Ives house, which is the official residence of the president of the university. And so here's where I am. I have adapted one of the bedrooms to serve as a studio, and I do, even before the pandemic, spend hours on end here every evening when I get home. After my day of work, I start what I call my second shift in this same quarter. So I'm very much used to be in this particular space, and it is my studio, as you can see. I have, obviously, as a public health professional, I'm the first one who tries very much to comply with the directives of both the county, the state, and national guidelines on staying at home. Due to my responsibilities, though, I have done a very well-structured scheduling so that I can actually be present physically in both the medical campus and the Coral Gables. And specifically what I do is I go twice a week to the medical campus, especially these few months when I am serving as interim CEO of U-Health. That was a decision by the U-Health board as we were heading into the expected surge in demand, which would start in April and then would peak in early May and then taper off towards June. So for those 3 months, I've taken this additional responsibility. This is additional to my role as president of the entire university. And I do try to be more in close contact with the people in the front lines. Obviously, we do that with all kinds of physical distancing measures. I wear a mask. We exercise the 6 feet of distance. Obviously, extensive hand hygiene and avoiding touching of the face and all the standard recommendations. But I have been going for about 3 hours each of those 2 days. And then once a week, I am at the Coral Gables campus. Again, we have about 250 students there. These were students that really had no place to go other than their residential facilities. We discussed this. We were against, and I'm glad we made this decision against the total closure, because we started seeing that there were students for whom the only option was their dorms. And those were mostly international students. They really had no option. If they went back home to their countries, they most likely would not be able to return, and they would have their studies interrupted. And then we also had some local students from very underprivileged households where this was their safest, UM was their safest alternative. So in a very rigorous case-by-case analysis, we ended up from the usual 4,300 students that we have who are residential to just over 250. Obviously, with all of them, we can practice extensive distancing, but we have the grounds people working on the grounds, minimal staff, looking at correspondence and other things. So I try to be there again for about 3 hours once a week to just make sure that I'm present with the members of our community that are still going there and just dealing with anything that arises. Other than that, I'm the rest of the week here at home, like everybody else.
What you described actually reminds me of what happens on the campus after a hurricane. And while the pandemic can't be compared with a hurricane, I guess one has to take similar measures because of the large number of the community for which the university is responsible. So I hadn't realized that we had the students, but it reminds me of post-hurricane periods.
Right, the same happened with, you're absolutely right, the same happened with Irma. There were, in that case, only about 100 students, mostly, for example, Chinese students. It wasn't practical for them to fly all the way back. And in this case, we have other nationalities as well of our international students. So, and by the way, because of hurricanes, we do have a very experienced emergency management team, and that has been a great reassurance. But we do follow some of the same routines, like regular meetings with that team, etc. The difference here is the duration of these emergencies, like nothing we have encountered before. So that's very different in that respect.
President Frenk, perhaps that's a segue to the second question. As a public health expert, and not an architect, obviously, I was interested in hearing your perspectives on how you feel these recent events might influence the future design of our built environments and its impact perhaps on health and well-being. And I realize that we're really at the beginning of this, but with your long experience in perhaps not identical but similar situations, I was curious to hear your thoughts.
Yes, you know, let me organize my thinking as a good public health professional according to the phases of an emergency. If I look at the lessons for the pre-pandemic period and what we have learned in terms of preventing future pandemics, my main conclusion is that this pandemic, like almost all the recent pandemics, is very much an anthropogenic event. The way we have, as humans, related to our natural environment, mostly to expand the built environment, is to a large extent responsible for what we're seeing. Particularly the invasion of ecosystems, the cutting down of forests has brought humans in contact with other species that carry some of those viruses and has facilitated what's called, jumping the species barrier. This is not the first time. Back in the beginnings of the 20th century, the first outbreaks of yellow fever were largely due to humans' efforts to colonize jungle settings, tropical settings, and that exposed them to mosquitoes that would carry. It's also a virus. It's actually the same virus that it's a virus. It's actually the same mosquito that produces Zika and dengue. But yellow fever was then transmitted to humans because they were present in ecosystems, invading that ecosystems, cutting down trees, and altering the dynamics. Now that has expanded enormously as we have grown and our footprint on the planet. So the first lesson is this is not like there's the natural environment there, and here we are, and something bad happened. It's a natural occurrence. This is not at all simply nature playing its own, following its own dynamics. This is largely prompted by us. The first mechanism is our invasion of ecosystems, our destructive invasion very often, that puts us in close contact with other species and allows the virus to jump that species barrier. The second thing are our practices in terms of livestock. The way we have led to this incredible high density way of multiplying and producing, whether it's poultry or swine, pork, to in crowded conditions, in very anti-hygienic. This again facilitates the spread. We have the bird flu, we have the swine flu. This is very much related to our practices in the food industry. And then the third piece is, again, very much related to practices like bringing live animals into crowded markets, like apparently happened in this Wuhan food market, wet markets where you have live animals, again, putting in a very crowded environment humans in touch with other species. So there's that first element of the built environment, the way we think of building the natural environment needs to be rethought. And I hope this is a wake-up call for the need to be respectful of other species and be respectful of the health of our planet, because we are putting our own survival at risk, as we are seeing with this pandemic. This is also these are called zoonoses. These are diseases that start in animals and then jump to humans, and it's highly related to that first dimension. Now, once that barrier is crossed, of course, a key part of the built environment is the density of populations. And again, I think we're going to have to rethink that. I mean, part of the reason why this pandemic was so bad in New York City is just the density, public transportation. All of that has to be rethought in a very mindful way, mindful of the need to protect our health. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean that rural communities are immune from this. As we have seen, there are outbreaks all over. But it is a fact that high density concentrations, urban concentrations, obviously produce a higher transmissibility of the virus. And then when it comes then to the response, the third phase, when we are in the thick of the pandemic, as we are now, I think this lockdown, this call for people to staying indoors, I think should also force us to rethink what is that indoor experience. We've been using the term social distancing. I don't like it. I think this is physical distancing. This is increasing our own personal physical space from others. But we gotta remain socially connected, because as we know, the toll that this self-isolation has caused in physical health terms. People are maybe eating more than they should, exercising less, but especially the emotional dimension of health is huge. So how do we, again, redesign the way we live together in a way where we can remain socially connected? So it's not just connectivity, but connectedness that matters. How do we design common spaces like parks and others where we could still maintain safe distancing, physical distancing rules, but not have everyone locked up the way we've had? So I think there's huge lessons in the pre-pandemic, during the first moments, and then when we're in the full response mode, the full adaptation mode, that I hope we will take the time to learn those lessons and then make sure we're better prepared for the next pandemic. There will be other pandemics that we can be assured of, and we just need to learn those lessons.
Yeah, I think understanding those, particularly from your perspective, I think has been very clarifying, and I'm grateful for you to have taken a few minutes of what is a very busy schedule to be able to discuss this, because the hopes of these interviews is to speak, of course, within the world of architecture and urban design, but these questions involve many disciplines, and so the hopes is to engage experts like yourself so that we may think more holistically about our future cities when we re-engage one another in the physical world. So thank you once again, and I really wish you continued health for you and your family, and I look forward to seeing one another in the relatively near future on campus.
Thank you, Carie. My best wishes to you as well, and I too look forward to the time when we will resume that in-person interaction.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.